Last week, I talked about the teams that surprised all of us in 2024. Well, there were a lot of other teams that surprised us as well. However, they weren't pleasant surprises. For a lot of fan bases, quite the opposite. These were the 10 most disappointing teams from the 2024 college football season. But before we get to today's video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you're watching this video, odds are you love college football, and odds are you are subscribed to my channel, so make sure to subscribe to one of the best college football communities here on YouTube. We'll kick off today's video with the biggest disappointment in all of college football, and possibly one of the biggest disappointments of the last decade, and that honor goes to Florida State, who finished the 2024 season 2-10. Not only were they the biggest disappointment, they were arguably the worst team at the FBS level last season, especially given the talent on that roster. Just 1 year after winning 13 games and barely missing the college football playoff, this was a team that won only 2 games. And when you look at their 2 victories, they're not all that great either. They beat Cal at home by only 5 points, a game in which they scored only 14 points. Then they won their second to last game of the season when they took on Charleston Southern. They won only 1 game in conference play, and they beat only 1 FBS team. I know Florida State wasn't necessarily expected to be a national championship contender, but they did begin the season ranked number 10, and they did begin the season with a lot of ACC aspirations. It takes a special kind of bad to win only 2 games at the FBS level, you know, when you're coming off 23 wins the previous 2 years. Pretty much ever since the 2014 season, Utah has consistently been one of the best programs in all of college football. Entering 2024, they were the preseason favorite to win the Big 12. Well, not only did they fail to reach the Big 12 championship game, they failed to even reach a bowl game. Utah finished the season going 5-7, their worst year since 2013. For Utah, they began the season ranked number 12, and they actually got as high as number 10. They actually started the season 4-0, but they lost 7 consecutive games before winning their final game of the season at UCF. It'll be interesting to see if this is just a blip of a season for Utah and if they'll be back in Big 12 contention next year. I've talked about them numerous times this offseason, and despite finishing 10-3 in 2024, I actually have Missouri as a disappointment. They won 11 games in 2023, and in 2024, they began the season ranked number 11. Missouri actually climbed as high as number 6 in the AP poll, and they were looking like they were going to be a legitimate threat to reach the college football playoff. They began the season going 4-0, but they win 3-3 over their next 6 games, and all 3 of their losses were really disgusting performances. They fell by 30 to Texas A&M, they fell by 34 to Alabama, and they did lose a close one by only 4 points to South Carolina. But every time they played a good opponent, they got absolutely embarrassed. Again, it's really tough to say they were a disappointment when they won 10 games, but considering the preseason hype and the fact that they were ranked as high as number 6, yeah, I think it's a disappointing year for Missouri. It was the first season in the SEC for Oklahoma, and it was tied for their worst season in about 25 years. They finished the season going 6-7 after beginning the season ranked number 16 in the AP poll. The Sooners were coming off a 10-win season, and there was a lot of hype surrounding them as they jumped conferences. Early on, things were looking really good for them as they began the season 3-0. They lost to number 6 Tennessee, but entering October, they were 4-1, and they were still in a potential playoff spot. But they proceeded to lose 3 consecutive games and 4 of their next 5, with their only win coming against Maine. The Sooners dropped 3 of their final 4 games and failed a Navy in their bowl game, dropping them to under 500 for the season. Overall, the Sooners went only 2-6 in conference play. Like I mentioned earlier, their 6 wins were tied for the fewest they've had since 1998. Nebraska is a weird one for me because I don't think that many people had high expectations for them entering the season. When looking at the previous seasons, they hadn't even reached a bowl game since 2016. They were coming off a 5-win season, and prior to that, they were coming off a 4-win season. Well, for Nebraska, they began their season by winning 3 straight games, including a really impressive victory over Colorado. The Cornhuskers actually climbed to number 22 in the AP poll. They lost to a top 25 team in Illinois, but they won back-to-back games, moving them to 5-1 on the season. At this point, it looked like Nebraska was going to cruise into a bowl game and potentially make some noise in the Big Ten. Unfortunately for the Cornhuskers, they lost 4 consecutive games and 5 of their final 6 games. After starting the season 5-1, they ended the regular season by going 6-6. 6. Now, they did end their season on a high note as they took down Boston College in the Pinstripe Bowl and finished with 7 wins. For Nebraska, those 7 wins were the most they've had in a season since 2016, so it's been nearly a decade since we saw a Nebraska team this good. Despite that, they did begin the season 5-1, and I think many people out there were expecting them to finish the year with many more wins. Oklahoma State is definitely up there with Florida State as the most disappointing teams in all of college football this past year. The Cowboys were coming off a 10-win season, and they appeared in the 2023 Big 12 Championship. Well, in 2024, despite starting the season ranked 17, they finished their season with only 3 wins. The craziest part is, Oklahoma State actually began their season going 3-0, and they climbed as high as number 13 in the AP poll, but they managed to drop their next 9 games and finish the season on a 9-game losing streak. I mean, I don't know how you go from winning 10 games, playing in the Big 12 Championship, to winning your first 3 games, climbing as high as number 13 in the polls, and then you managed to lose 9 consecutive games. And it wasn't like we saw this coming either. Oklahoma State has been one of the more consistent teams in college football really for the last 20 years or so. Their 3 wins are the fewest they've had in a season since 2000. Yeah, I didn't watch a whole lot of Oklahoma State this year. I'm not exactly certain what went down, but to start 3-0 and to lose your final 9 games, yeah, that's absolutely insane. I had a lot of great takes in 2024, but unfortunately, I had some bad ones as well. One of those was my preseason hype with Arizona. I thought this was going to be a team that should have been the favorite to win the Big 12 and a potential playoff sleeper. They were coming off a 10-win season, a season in which they were ranked as high as number 11 in the polls. Arizona was ranked number 21 to start the season, but yeah, things went downhill quickly for them. After beginning the season 2-0, Arizona proceeded to lose 6 of their next 7 games, and their season was essentially a wipe. Overall, they finished the year losing 7 of their final 8 games. Now, I know I was higher on Arizona than a lot of people, but they turned over a lot of the same roster from the 2023 team. After winning 10 games, I thought their floor would be 10 games, and I thought they'd win way more than that. But unfortunately, I was wrong, but as an Arizona State fan, it did make me feel a whole lot better. USC is a bit of a weird one because I don't think they entered the season with a whole lot of hype. They were coming off an 8-win season in 2023, so the fact they won 7 games in 2024, I don't think that many people were all that surprised. But the reason I have them as a disappointment was because how they started the year. They took down number 13 LSU, and they began the season 2-0, and they climbed up to number 11 in the AP poll. After a close loss to Michigan, they bounced back with a win, and they were 3-1, and they were ranked number 11 in the polls once again. But the Trojans managed to lose 3 consecutive games, and 4 of their next 5, and their season was essentially a wash. The Trojans finished the regular season going 6-6, but they did end their season on a high note as they took down Texas A&M in the Las Vegas Bowl to give them 7 wins on the year. It was a really weird season for Kansas, who's probably one of the best 5-win teams we've ever seen in college football. They began the season ranked number 22, and for the Jayhawks, it was the first time since 2009 they began the season ranked inside the top 25 of the AP poll. They climbed as high as number 19 in the polls, the 3rd consecutive season they've been ranked number 19 at any point. Unfortunately for Kansas, they couldn't be ranked any higher as they had a really strange season. They finished the season going 5-7, and right in the middle, they had a 5-game losing streak. To start out the year, Kansas was actually 1-5, and they were already making the case for the biggest disappointment in all of college football. Despite the rough start, they managed to go 4-2 to close the season. Now for Kansas, the tough part for them was all of their losses were extremely close. They fell to Illinois by 6 points. They fell to UNLV by 3. They fell to West Virginia by 4. They fell to Arizona State by 4. And they fell to Kansas State by 2. They had so many close losses where a couple of plays here and there, things would have looked completely different, and this could have been a Kansas team that won 8, 9, or maybe even 10 games. For the first time in 15 years, there was a lot of hype surrounding Kansas entering the college football season, but like they've done many times, they let everyone down. We're going to wrap up today's video with the 2023 national champions in Michigan. They finished the 2024 campaign winning 8 games. For the Wolverines, it was their worst season in a non-COVID year since 2017 when they also won 8 games. Now, I don't think many people were expecting them to go back-to-back or be a legitimate playoff threat, but the fact that they lost 5 games and they were so bad for most of the season, that was a bit of a surprise. Now for Michigan, their 8-5 record is a little bit deceiving because they ended their year on such a high note. They won their final 3 games, including an upset on the road at number 2 Ohio State and a victory over Alabama in the ReliaQuest Bowl. well. But prior to that, this was a Michigan team that was 5-5, and they were on the verge of missing a bowl game. They actually began their season 4-1, but they had a rough stretch in which they lost 4 of their next 5 games. Considering where they were to begin the season, and considering they were 5-5, the fact that they ended their season on such a high note, it does shift it just a little for Michigan, but this was still the reigning national champions that really had a rough season in 2024. Well, that wraps it up for today's video. What team do you think was the biggest disappointment in 2024? Was it one of the 10 teams I included in today's video, or was there another team that disappointed that didn't crack the list? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know in the comment section down below. Before you leave, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. I'm posting college football videos all off season long, so make sure to subscribe so you never miss a video. Also, don't forget to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm, and it helps share the video and my channel with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.